Welcome to the first episode of the sixth series of the Women in CX podcast, a series dedicated to real talk conversations between women in customer experience. Listen in as we share our career stories, relive the moments that shaped us, and voice our opinions as loudly as we like about all manner of CX subjects. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, and in today's episode, I'll be talking to an incredible community member from the UK. She's an award-winning UX researcher, having worked for startups and various public sector-focused consultancies as a user research consultant, with a focus upon improving government digital services. Prior to her work in UX research, she worked as an information professional in the NHS at Oxfam and as a librarian at Microsoft UK, which provided her with many of the skills she uses today. Let me introduce you to today's inspiring guest, lead user researcher at Santander and CX sister Natasha Dekker. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Claire. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Hey, welcome to the Inspiring Women in CX podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and welcome to everybody who's listening or watching along wherever you are. So, Natasha, I'm going to jump straight in with the same question I ask all of our guests, and that is to share your story of how you found your way into the Women in CX community and how things have been going for you so far.
So I found my way into the community because I was looking for another space to network with kind of people, mainly women, if I'm honest, that were interested in kind of user experience, customer experience, but would also kind of widen my own understanding and network, but also wasn't so focused on design, because there are so many communities out there that are just focused on design. Like I can name like 5 Slack communities off the top of my head that are just focused on design, and there are others that are focused on research, and we'll talk about this in a minute. And I wanted somewhere where it was a little bit more holistic, and also where I would get exposed to more, again, women that were at different levels of seniority, so I could learn, and also for my networking. And I was researching, and then I was on LinkedIn, then I saw you, and you have a great profile, and I saw the group community in the group, and I was like, yes, I want to be part of that. And while I haven't been as engaged as I would like to have been for the last few months, for reasons which we will talk about, I really value being part of the community, and I really like the way everyone is everyone's hype person, and also the way we're given opportunities in that space that we don't, where it's often harder to get those sometimes in a work, or if you're trying to do it on your own. So yeah, that's my take on the community.
Like what kind of opportunities have you enjoyed?
Well, I think the fact that we're having this conversation, which is amazing, and also the fact that I'm running a masterclass in a few weeks, which which is also ridiculous to me, because I'm like, oh, me, a masterclass, like that. It doesn't. They don't always correlate in my mind. So being able to kind of be given those opportunities and being able to run with those, because when you're in a work situation, you often have to push really hard for those sorts of things, and you have to ask for the time, and you have to prove why you should be given those opportunities before people give you those opportunities. And as a woman, we know that's 10 times harder. And I'm really glad that this is a community where we get to flex those muscles, which is great for not just career development, but for personal development as well.
Yeah, and for everybody, right? Because much to your disagreement there, you're an expert in what you do.
Thank you.
Helping our community to understand user research through a masterclass is an awesome way to give back, right? And like you said, the draw and the attraction of being part of a really diverse community that is holistic and takes in multiple disciplines and industries and backgrounds and cultures is the fact that we get to share so much diversity and figure out some of those lesser understood areas for ourselves as individuals, whilst giving our expertise in the thing that we do know a lot about. So so thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights at the upcoming masterclass. And wasn't Deanna something to do with how you found us?
Yes,
Avis.
because I think Deanna interviewed me, didn't she, for something like way back, and Deanna's great.
Oh, it was a prospects research, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. And then she spoke to me about it, and the more she told me about it, I was like, oh, this actually sounds really good. And then I looked into it more and more, and I was like, oh, actually, this is definitely something that I want to be part of, because I remember having a really good interview with Deanna, because I think she'd caught me, I think, when my previous role wasn't going amazingly, so I was probably more candid than I would have been. I think at a different point about kind of UX and things like that.
Yeah, and just for the listeners who probably don't know what we're talking about, because Women in CX is entirely a product of research and co-design with our members. We did a big piece of research last year that involved existing members, people who'd left, and people who were interested in joining us. And Natasha was one of those. So it was a actual, I would say, qualitative research interview about needs and goals and how community could support, wasn't it? So great that we're going to be talking about user research today, because how ironic that actually that was the initiation point that got you hooked to come and take part, was actually our user research. So thank you for that amazing segue. So I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about your career journey. And you've said there's a few little ups and downs already, of like kind of highlighted that, but you're at Santander now, you're in a lead position. How did this start? How did you get to be this awesome woman that you are today?
Thank you. And okay, so I've been, I would say, working professionally in a proper career for like the last 10 years. And I started out as a librarian. So I was a librarian for the better part of, I would say, six years. And
I love that about you, librarian.
and I started out as a librarian in a very niche organization. So I was a librarian at Microsoft, which is a very unique place to have that sort of role. And what it did was that it exposed me to a lot of business practices and business culture and things that even now I'm like, oh, they were doing stuff long before other organizations were doing stuff. So when people talk about agile and Kanban and Scrum and all of this sort of thing, and working from home and hybrid working and different communities, Bitcoin, stuff like that stuff I was already aware of before it even hit kind of mainstream. And so I did that for 5 years. I took what I thought was my dream job at a charity for a year. It was not. And I was doing communications and stuff like that. And I did a lot of traveling, but I think working at a charity, and this is worth another podcast,
whole conversation,
is a very unique environment that I wasn't suited to. So then I ended up doing a stint as a clinical evidence specialist at an NHS trust, which was more closely aligned to my previous library work. And that was a maternity cover contract, which was great, by the way, because I think the good thing about having a contract role is that there's rarely any probation periods. You can just get in and do the work and not have to worry about the politics that are happening around you, because you're not going to be there long enough to have to worry about it. So it was a great role. And coming off the back of my charity job, which had been, frankly, the ending hadn't been really good, it gave me a chance to heal and get my confidence back. And I don't think we talk enough about how, when you're in a bad job situation, the toll it can take on your confidence, your mental health. It took me a year to kind of get over that and feel like me again. And by which point it was the end of my contract. And I was like, what do I do? I live in the West Midlands, and in the West Midlands, you either work for Jaguar Land Rover, you work for you. It's true.
I used to live near there, so I know your
you,
true
you work for
facts.
JLR. You work for JLR, you work for a hospital, or you work for the civil service, because the DFE is in Coventry. There's a few offices up in, I think DWP is in Tamworth, and I think the Department for Levelling Up is in Wolverhampton. So and I was like, I don't know what I should do, because I don't really want to commute to Leicester. So I saw a job ad for UX user research consultant from my first company, and it's a really interesting interview where I spoke to the manager, who's actually now my friend, and they said, tell us a story of something that you just watched or that you've just seen, and talk us through it. And I was like, okay, this is one of the more interesting interviews I've done. And then
So you liked it straight away.
yeah. And then I sent through my CV, which I'm embarrassed to say was a very, like, now in hindsight, I'm like, wow, it was like, don't get me wrong, all the content was there, but it wasn't laid out in the most accessible way. And long story short is I went in for the interview on kind of like a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon, and they called me back at like, I think 6:30 or something, to let me know that I'd got the role. And then that was in 2019. And was it 2019? Yeah, that was 2019.
Like those pre-pandemic years seem like a really long time ago,
it all blurs together. And then I ended up being a UX research consultant in the public sector. And I think, and it's a combination of things, right? Because you only get as many opportunities as you create space to have those opportunities, I think. And I went into this role kind of like, okay, I'm going to make a go of it. It was really hard because I was essentially changing career, completely new kind of things to learn. I don't have a design background. I would say that I have a very clear social science research background. And I went into this role, and I was very lucky that I had a great team around me. Like, I'm still friends with her and I were still really close, and the guy that was the designer on the team, like we're still friends, and we talk like fairly often. And I worked on some great projects, and yeah, it was. And then I was in the public sector for a while. I worked at a startup. I tried a role at one company, and something after my really terrible experience at a charity, I've gotten a lot better at listening to my gut instinct. And I know now that if there's, sometimes you just know, and I think subconsciously we know before we kind of consciously know. And there's a really great quote from Steven Spielberg where he says, listen to the whispers. And when you listen to those whispers, that's usually when you make the right and probably the most momentous decisions that you're going to make. And I was at a company for 3 months, and I was like, you know what, it's a no. So I just handed in my notice within my probation period, and I left, and they pretended that they'd like fired me or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm handing in my notice. Like, this is not for me. I went and worked for a startup for a while, and then I ended up at a legal services company. And the thing you should take away from this is that I am incredibly driven, and I am incredibly not ambitious in the way where I want like a bigger office, bigger car, anything like that. But I am ambitious in the sense that I'll be frank, I want the money to do nice things, right?
No shame in that.
And the only way to do that is to kind of progress and scale up your own skills and all the rest of it. And because my last job, my manager and I think were just different people, and I lost a bit of confidence, and it took like a really good recruiter, actually, she's a great recruiter, and she was like, because we spoke a few times, and she's like, I want to put you forward for this role at Santander, and I was like, oh, I don't know, it's a lead position, and she was like, well, let's do it. So Christmas, like literally, I'm not joking, Christmas 2022, I had an interview on the Monday just before Christmas holidays, had an interview on the Monday, and they let me know on the Tuesday that they wanted me for the job. And then obviously with background checks and everything, because it is a bank, I still can't decide what's worse, like going in for certain government clearance or background checks for an organization. Like you're looking at a 6 or 7 week turnaround. And then now I'm a lead UX researcher at one of the largest banks in the country, if not Europe, actually. So that's on paper it sounds amazing, but it hasn't always been easy. Like I sit here and I mean, now it's a lot more different. Like it's very rare now that I struggle to do my applications, because I see terrible, I see it as a game, but you shouldn't, I know. And I think because I've been rejected from so many jobs like over the last few years, and I've been to so many interviews, that now I tend to look at it as I get it, great. I don't get it, at least I tried. Because that really old quote about you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, I think that is so true, because trying costs a little bit, but there's a lot to be learned in the trying and the failing, which took me. And I think this is probably because I'm like a millennial, because we're not really, I don't think we weren't taught failure very well, but I've learned a lot from my failures, and there've been some incredibly horrific failures, but I've learned so much from them, and I've carried that through. And now when I'm in this lead position and I have like a team and I have researchers who are more junior to me, I'm like, oh, I definitely see how I can carry through some of the lessons I've learned. I'll probably mess up in other ways, but I can carry through some of those lessons so I can benefit the people around me.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think two reflections from me is I totally agree that like the biggest lessons are often in failure. Like when you're having a nice time and everything's great, like that's easy, isn't it? But you're not necessarily growing. And I know that you and I talked offline quite often, didn't we, about this career transition and what to do, and being able to keep getting up and dusting yourself off, I think, after rejection, after failure, after, you know, whatever these things are that come your way. And, you know, that is it me feeling like when you're experiencing a lot of friction in the workplace or with a line manager, and just trying to keep your head above the water through those times, being able to look back and build on those, make sure, for example, your people that you're now leading don't ever feel some of those things that you felt by being misunderstood, in air quotes, because of a lack of understanding of what you do. You know, you're now in a position to change that for people. So I'm super glad that you're in this position now and you're leading a group of researchers, because I think you're going to absolutely smash it there. But I think we've already kind of started touching on a couple of the challenges and barriers you've experienced, but what would be one big one that you've either overcome or you're working to overcome that's helped you become the woman you are today?
Well, I think there's the obvious ones, that I'm a woman. I mean, that's the bit.
Can you overcome that?
I don't know. Like it's an ongoing problem that we'll never solve. I think in all, and also I am a woman of color. I don't know what the current acronym for being a woman of color is, because I know BAME isn't really used that's not meant to be used anymore. Person of color, I think, I don't know, people are funny about that. So I am not white. I am a woman of color, and I think I have operated in predominantly white spaces my entire life, and as a first generation person that was born in England, it means that there's a lot of cultural touch points that I don't have, and that impacted me growing up, and it's meant that I don't ever really feel like I fit in anywhere, and that's like, that's a fairly, probably hear my dog in the background.
Yeah, just
sorry,
a bit of a
I'm so sorry. And I think it means that I've never really fit in anywhere, and that's been hard. And I'm in my mid to late 30s now, and it's taken a lot of therapy, where my therapist was like, but what it has given you is an ability to blend into majority of the situations that I find myself in. And that isn't something that I thought about, because I went to a very nice school growing up, really, really nice school. And then I went to a university where a lot of the kids had gone to grammar schools, and I just let them assume I'd gone to a grammar school as well, because like that was and I realized that's their own bias, right? They see a well-educated Asian girl and they just assume grammar, and not that I'd gone to like a really good independent school. So that's their bias. And I think in terms of my work life, being a person of color means that people have certain expectations of the life you've led up until that point, and the types of schools you've been to, the type of life that you lead. So kind of like, personally, people are always really surprised that I've traveled as much as I have, that I have tattoos. That's always a surprise. And then professionally, I have a very like non-typical Asian person CV, which I'm so happy to say is changing. Like, I meet so many young Asian women now that are being given the freedom to not just go and have to study law or economics or
medicine
or some variation of medicine, right? And I love that. My team at the moment is so diverse, and it gives me so much joy to see that. And I'm always like, how can I empower these women to do more? How can I give them more opportunities? So I think so those are very, I think, obvious obstacles. And I think the other ones, I think, are personal ones for me, where I think when you grow up a certain way, you have certain ways of communicating, certain ways of kind of just being in the world around you. And I've had to unlearn a lot of that to kind of like push myself out of my comfort zone, and also learn that failure isn't bad. Like, it feels bad, but it's actually not bad. The other thing is that because I have a tendency to be a people pleaser, so the way you talk is often geared around that, and I've had to learn how to talk in a more assertive way. And I got some terrible feedback a year and a half ago, about the way that I talk invites people to question me. And that wasn't nice to hear. And I was
what does that even mean?
Right. But the thing is, the person that said that to me, they're a very, very good researcher, and they were saying it from a professional standpoint, like, and obviously, I mean, it's a bit personal as well. But when I went away and thought about it, I was like, actually, that's a really valid point. Like, it's not nice to hear, but it was an incredibly valid point. And I've taken that through the way that I communicate. And I think as a woman, as you progress, you either have to learn to communicate in a way that's effective. And before, like, if we look at the 80s and 90s, it would mean communicate like a man, which I think is BS. So I've just learned, because in linguistics, you have this thing where they say you should use more modal verbs. So instead of, oh, I might do this, it's I will do this, I do this. And I've tried to be more modal in the way that I communicate. So, and also things, because like even today, I had to do something, and the way that it was done was just not efficient. And I was like, why have we done it this way? And I said, next time I'd recommend that we do it this way. And everyone was like, oh, okay, yeah. fine, let's talk about that. Whereas a few years ago, I would never have said it like that. I wouldn't have said anything at all, or I would have been like, oh, do you think maybe we could think about doing it this way? I was like, no, I'd recommend we do it this way.
Yeah, just being way more direct and assertive about it.
But still polite, still open to the collaboration and stuff, because you don't ever want to, because I think there's a tendency for people to think, and especially with women, right, that when you're being firm and assertive,
it can just be misjudged, right? Like it can
completely.
If a man was behaving exactly the same way, it would be fine. But there's something about when it's a woman, like, who does she think she is? Or like she's bossy, or it can be misconstrued as some kind of like unexpected dominant behavior, and it's not. We're doing exactly the same thing the guy is, but because we're female, it comes off differently. There's so much to unpick in what you just talked. Obviously, like I am also a woman with a similar barrier to overcome, but I'm not a woman of color or a person of color. So so first thing I just wanted to pick up on there is like operating in environments where you are actually excluded, and perhaps not intentionally, but through unconscious bias or something systemic. I just wondered, like, did you have any role models that you looked up to?
No, because I think, and by the way, I'm so glad this is changing as well, because I hope that if there are women listening to this, and if you are a woman of color, please reach out. I think it is changing, but it is really hard, because I think a lot of people back when, like, what was this, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, people were still saying things like, I don't see color, and that would be okay. And on the surface that sounds okay, but it's taken no, it's not. And it's taken me a lot of unlearning to realize that by saying that, you are
it's a microaggression.
You're also erasing the depth of someone's experience, because by saying you don't see color to someone who is Black, or who maybe has gypsy, who is a gypsy or identifies as a traveler or anything like that, by saying I don't see color, I don't see any of these things, you're erasing such an important facet of who they are and who they present as, that actually how can you then say we're being inclusive? And
you should be celebrating the difference, right?
And not just celebrating it, but welcoming it, and welcoming the diverse views that it brings, because there's such a great example. So I think it's been doing the rounds on social media, which is going to completely date this podcast. But there's a few bits of ChatGPT that have been going around where people have been asking, those questions of like, boy gets in an accident with his dad and then has to be taken to the hospital, but the surgeon can't operate on him. Why not? And ChatGPT literally physically has an absolute breakdown, because it can't accept that the surgeon is a woman and she's the mother of the son. And there's lots of different variations of this, because ChatGPT has clearly been written by a group of very
white dudes,
and a very non-diverse group of people. And that's what happens. You end up, and I know it's been written about in Invisible Women, so
but it's also like where the source content comes from, right? Because it's pulling from the internet, and so much of the content on the internet is, again, dominated by non-diverse people, that it's pulling source information that is biased and racist in many cases.
And I always say this to people, like, I always say your design or whatever is only ever as good as how the research has informed it. Because if you're only ever, and it's the same with when people get interviewed for jobs, because there's a tendency to hire people that look and sound like you, which is why I'm massively in favor of having kind of panel interviews and making sure that they're more diverse, because candidates feel safe. Because I always say to people that if you want to get the best out of someone in an interview, then a candidate needs to be safe so they can be at their best. How are we enabling people to be their best selves, to give their best answers? And it's just little things like that. So when you hear about diversity and inclusion, yes, you have those overarching policies, but for me, it's those day-to-day things, like
Day-to-day
how
things,
how are people being empowered to be their best selves? And I think because of my own experiences, it's something that I carry through, and I'm always very conscious of it, regardless of where I work and whatever role I have. I'm very, very conscious of it.
We get to be the role model now, though, right? Because women of color are looking up to you and seeing
Oh God.
someone who is actually living and breathing and doing the stuff that you wish you'd seen when
Yeah,
you were on your way up. So
I
I
hope
think
so.
I think that's what it's about, right? It's being able to embody that thing that you were missing and keep putting the hand back down to help lift the next generation.
I think so a really good example of this is back when I was working in libraries, and it's a very white environment, and it's slowly changing, but it is a very white middle class environment. And I kept getting asked to do all these talks and stuff, and I actually and people forget you can do this, right, with talks and stuff like that, but you can say no. And I actually started saying no, and I said, have you thought about XYZ person? Because, and this is something that my partner and I talk about a lot, is that, and I know people are all about that hustle life and getting exposure and stuff, but I think part of when you're in a certain position is that part of the power that you have is saying, actually, how about I hand it over to someone else? How about I give someone else an
Yeah,
opportunity?
totally agree.
How about I say no? Or how about I educate this person that's asking me on all the other great people they could ask who potentially would really benefit from this opportunity in a way that I would, but they would benefit from it more. And
Yeah.
I think we don't do that enough. We don't like open it up to more people, because the door gets open like a little bit, and then it's like, well, no, let's open up the whole bloody thing so more people can go through. And that's something that I've done. And there's like loads of stuff online about inclusion riders, and I don't do it as much now, but when I do get asked to talk for something, I'm always like, okay, how many other people of color do you have on the roster? Like, if you don't have this much, then I'm not doing it, stuff
And
like that.
encouraging it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got an example actually from well, me, which was I got asked to judge some awards, and a
Nice.
panel was all white dudes. So I was like, well, this doesn't really represent what I stand for in women in CX. So I was like, actually, I know of a woman of color who is way better at this particular area, which is contact centers, than me. I'd like to put her forward for this opportunity, and also so you can start to recognize the benefit of having diversity, so in gender, and not just a homogenous, everyone looks the same panel. And over the course of the last couple of years, I ended up working with them still as like a presenter of the awards instead. But like this year, like their panel was like majority women and of all different colors. And I was
Amazing.
like, wow, but being able to see that change happen
Yeah.
as a result of me saying, I'm not going to do it, but I know someone who can, and passing the baton to someone actually who's way more qualified than me to do it. And like that person has also since gone on to increase her visibility and been asked to do loads more things because she was seen,
Yeah.
So so I think, yeah, the one that it's that privilege, isn't it, when you get that
Yeah.
privilege, being able to pass that on. And that's part of why I love our community so much, because now people come to me and say, we want more gender diversity in our events or on our podcasts or on our events. And I'm like, here's a whole load of amazing women that you can now have as speakers and guests that were just never seen before. And
I love that.
yeah, so that was a nice reminder of that one. And now for a quick word from one of our sponsors. We are proud to be supported by Kantar, the world's leading evidence-based insight and consulting company. Kantar CX helps clients define customer and employee experience strategies, better understand their customers via measurement, and in turn improve business outcomes, driving true commercial ROI. To find out more about Kantar's CX practice, please visit the sponsor links on the homepage of womenincx.community. Now back to the episode. And then the second thing I was going to unpick here was people pleasing.
Yes.
Now, I think, because I'm also a people pleaser, I think there is definitely a link between women in customer experience and our inherent people pleasing tendencies, because basically what we're doing is trying to make things better for the population out there, whether it's employees, users, customers. But you mentioned something which was around, based on a negative experience that you'd had, leading you to be able to be more attuned to other people, and how you've kind of taken that negative to being able to blend in, I think was the word you said.
Yes.
But the, people pleasing is not a good thing when you're not putting your own needs first, for sure. It's a terrible way to live your life. And I also suffer with people pleasing tendencies. But that you've like kind of turned that pain into something more powerful now through the assistance of therapy, which I also have. And anyone out there who's considering it, 100% go for it. Your life 100% will get better as a result. But I just think it's just super interesting the way that like you're presenting this career journey and the barriers and challenges you overcome as having been able to learn and take from what has been painful in many situations. Failing hurts, there's no two ways about it, but continuing to be able to build that into the next iteration of yourself. And whether it's been harsh feedback that you found a grain of truth in and was able to build off the back of that, I think these are all super like skills that we need to embrace in being able to continue to make that move forward. Because just to quote what you said earlier, you wouldn't have even spoken up, you wouldn't have given your opinion even, and now you know how to assertively but still positively frame why you think something needs to be different next time. And I just think being able to look back and see that growth curve, and now be in this leadership position where you actually have some authority to be able to do things differently, is just a really great story. So I just wanted to thank you for being vulnerable and open and sharing that, because I think more of us need to be talking about the shitty parts of our experience that have led us to be where we are today.
Oh, what, not like on LinkedIn where I should just talk about all the amazing things that I've done. I got up at 5 and I created a business and I made $1 billion by 5 o'clock. What?
And managed my household and like 5 kids at the same time. I have it all. Wait, it's just not true. And I think there's so much pressure because of things like social media and people just talking about the outcomes, the results, the good bits, that not if people share the reality of how bloody hard it is, what it's like to be burnt out all the time, what it's like to experience mental health challenges. And part of the reason I love this podcast is because we can show up and have real talk conversations. And I know our listeners give us the feedback that's what they love about it. It's the warts and all, but the turning pain into power part of what you've been talking about, I'm finding super inspiring. So good on you, Natasha. And I've personally seen you grow in this last year.
Thank you.
And it's your confidence, I think, that's grown.
Thank you.
Moving on.
Sorry, I've lost your sound there for a second.
It's because I just hit my microphone.
Okay.
I'll edit that bit out. So moving into the next section while we're giggling away. Moving into the next section is to be thinking about your kind of expert area now, and this whole concept of UX and UX research and all of that lovely stuff. So I think maybe we should start, assuming that we've got a very diverse podcast listenership that might not be so familiar with UX. What exactly is it, is my first question, and how is it similar or different to customer experience? What are the intersections betwixt the two?
So this is a great question, and it's one that I do often think about, because I think for outside looking in, it's really difficult to kind of draw that boundary. And I would say, so in terms of user research, so when we talk about UX, it's split out into a number of disciplines. So I myself would put myself as a UX researcher, but you could also be a UX designer, and that UX designer could also be broken down into interaction design and visual design. And I would say visual design is very close to what we used to call graphic design back in the day. We also have what is now trendy that people are called UX writers, but that's a lot, I would say that's more aligned to content design. And I think that's really seeing its heyday now, because we're seeing like the growth of kind of chatbots and conversational design. So having those content design skills, I think, is incredibly valuable. And then you have someone like yourself, Claire, who classes themselves as a service designer, and that, I think, is an incredibly unique skill.
Well, I did class myself as a service designer, but now I class myself as a CX designer, because I metabolized lots of different disciplines into the way that I do it. So
but I love it though. And so all of those fit in to UX in air quotes, and the whole aim of it is to kind of surface the needs and wants of users, and to design services that fit the needs of a wide array as possible of those users. So if you're creating something that it's not just for one specific demographic, I mean, unless if you're developing a very bespoke product, then yes, of course. But for me, coming from a public sector background, you need something that everyone can access, everyone can use. Something simple as the forms on the fields on a digital form, like are the forms big enough to allow for really long surnames? Do they allow for double barrel surnames? And the only way you can find that information out is if you conduct, I don't know, surveys, interviews, you create prototypes, and you test those and you research those with as wide a sample of the population as you can. So that's where I see user research, and where I see customer experience is, and I know maybe some of the listeners will not like this.
I love it. Be provocative.
I think I see customer experience as being a little bit more reactionary, whereas research can be a little slower. Not always, but if we're looking at discovery work, that's a little bit slower. It's more geared towards how can we like create this, how can we do this, whereas customer experience is, we've got this voice of the customer stuff, we've got our NPS surveys, they're coming in, like we're being told that this thing isn't working right, we need to go and fix it. But usually problems don't occur in isolation, and the user research is about understanding how that problem fits in context. And I think by the way, this has been my experience of customer experience, sorry, just from the relationship managers and the success managers that I've spoken to, and also a very heavy focus on quant numbers. So a lot of statistics, a lot of percentages, whereas a lot of research is mixed methods. So it's a lot of qualitative, a lot of quantitative information being pulled together to pull out really, really good insights. Because anyone can do a survey and say, yes, 56% of people said they don't like this. Fine. But out of those 56% people, how many of them have X amount of income? How old are they? Where do they live? How do all of those factors combined together contribute to why they gave that answer? And that's where the UX research is, because it's the nuance, it's the context. And but I think, and again, and I've seen this in like the last year or so in different roles, like I think where the crossover is actually sharing more, because I think people can get super territorial and super protective of their, I don't know, of their data, of their users, of their people. It's like, oh, I don't want you to bother them. And it's really funny because we have the same aim, which is building better services, building better experiences. And I think it's about the sharing more effectively and actually understanding what you need to share, because obviously I don't need a relationship manager doesn't need to know that I I don't know, I'm going to speak to 20 people about XYZ thing. What they need to know is, out of those 20 people, do the issues they have align with what they found coming out of MPS, from the MPS surveys from the last 90 days? Like, that's what they need to know. So it's about marrying up that information. And I think that's slowly changing, and I'm seeing more people that are open to that. Because customer experience as a concept, I think, has been around in larger organizations than user experience. And I don't just mean the design bit, I mean the research bit, the bit where you do the discovery, you test the prototypes, you get the feedback, and you kind of feed that into kind of decision making and building your problem statements and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that was a lot.
No, it wasn't. I was actually just looking on the community because someone told me something the other day and I can't find it right now, which was about basically user experience was used at a conference one day, and then it got like absorbed into the
Oh no.
yeah, it went into the world as something that was just to do with digital, but that was never its intention. And I'm like desperately looking for the reference point to this. But I'll include it in the show notes because there's a little YouTube video about it.
Oh, nice.
But I literally can't find it right now. But yeah, you're like, it's the same intents and purposes trying to do the same thing. But I think you're right, like the way that businesses interpret it can be quite different. And I know, talking to women in the community who are like applying for CX roles, and they can be anything from research and insights through to design, through to like customer support and customer service and training and everything, like, because it's so broad in terms of skill sets, and it's always so different, right? Because depending on what industry you work in and what vertical, what customer experience is for your organization, it's always going to mean different things. Whereas I think user experience is better understood because it's been absorbed into the consciousness of the world as something digital.
That's like, interesting.
Well, I just say this is just my experience. Like, you shared yours, I'm sharing mine. Where you're more likely to have, if there's in-house teams that are responsible for any experience, they would more likely be resourced in UX than they would in CX.
That's fair.
Because also it's tangibly more valuable to, because people don't have to make a grand leap to understand if I design a journey that's like really easy for people to use, it's going to translate to ourselves. Whereas in the context of an end-to-end experience, or even service design to some extent, some of the more salient points around emotional responses to people is much harder to grasp and hold on to, and therefore less well invested and less well understood. But for me, I think like actually it's time for CX to have a 2.0, and that's what I guess I'm working on with our community members and with the course that I'm developing, is being able to use some of the skill bases that come from outside our traditional industry, not just to use surveys to drive improvement, but to use design and research to drive innovation and change, because the world around us is being so rapidly shifted by technology. Like, you can't do CX without UX. You can't do future design of like where your organization's experience is going if you don't really understand and can deliver against that stuff. So I think like we actually need like a 2.0 that can metabolize digital and technology as part of the way that the world is shifting. And I think it's just great that we're in this community where we've got people that have expertise in all of these different areas to be able to do that. But it also relies on organizations not driving CX in the direction of our CX is an NPS score.
And I've seen that, right, where it's actually like our NPS score is this, we better bump it up by 5 points, and that's our deliverable for the year.
Target. And then all the resources going into surveys and technology to drive surveys in the determination to improve that NPS, which as anybody knows, like, it's so subjective anyway. Like, whether something is good or not as an experience is all to do with an individual. So I think we're on the same page, albeit coming from slightly opposite ends. But I'd be super excited to work on shaping up that 2.0 version of what CX is with you. So in the absence of being able to find that quote, that will be in the show notes if listeners what if I want to find out more about where that came from? But what is the state of UX from your point of view? And I know you and I have talked offline about some of the challenges around the current state of UX. I just talked about the current state of CX and where we need to move to. What's your view on the state of
Well, at the moment, it is completely in, I don't know, there might be people that have been in the industry longer than me that could disagree, but I think it's in a really odd state of flux, because at the moment, my LinkedIn is filled with people getting laid off from the giants, like from
technology?
Meta,
Yeah.
from Spotify, from places like that. But then my inbox is filled with people looking for contract user researchers for ridiculous day rates, like the kind of day rates where you're like, oh, is that what I should be doing? and and
I love a day rate job.
and it doesn't always compute. And I think there's a definite need for, and I say this from a user research perspective, I've definitely seen a need for user researchers, and I often see a need for UX designers. And it's very rare that you'll see people be kind of like, I need an interaction designer, I need a visual designer, I need a content designer. Like, it's,
but that kind of lines up with digital transformation, right?
Yeah.
Because so many businesses are investing in digital channels now. That's where the demand for this is coming from. Less demand for CX perhaps, but also because it's a temporary thing. They see digital transformation as a temporary thing. Why so much of this stuff is contract based, because they're outsourcing temporarily, needing to complete this transformation, whereby they're not going to want people to stay in house for the long term.
Which is super. I find that it's really odd. And then so that's like the industry itself. And then when you look at like the qualifications that you need, like I think one of my favorite, this was a couple of years ago because I know it's changed now, but if you look at the job specs for places like Monzo or Spotify or Adobe, and you look at what the UX spec is, I'm just like, that is ridiculous.
But is this like what I was saying with like the CX profession though? Like the job, you could go for a customer experience manager job, say, but the remit of that could be so vast.
And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, oh, we want you to have 10 plus years of experience doing this. And it's like, babes, like this wasn't even a job 10 years ago by this name, but sure. And it's like, have a PhD, be able to use all of these tools, do all of these things.
Be an anthropologist.
And it's like, what are you, I'm like, what are you looking for? What are you asking people to do? And it is ridiculous. And as someone who likes, because I keep my alerts open and stuff, because I always like to see kind of the jobs that are out there, because it tends to well, it's a good way to understand where you need to upskill. I think
it's good bellwether.
And I look at so I think really good adverts are from places like Bumble and Hinge, where they like, Bumble is always looking for like senior researchers, and I'm like, what's happening at Bumble though? Like, why are you going through them so quickly? And also big organizations like BT. Like BT has a great team. The lady that runs the team is ex government digital service. I applied for a role at the National Grid, but here's what's really interesting to your point. They're like, we're building a new team. We're building a new digital team, and we want someone to come in and help build that team. And I'm just like, but you're offering 70K, but that's still not enough for what you're asking us to do in this really large organization. Because imagine going into an organization and having to spin up a user research team, and because it's not just doing the work, right? You have to evangelize why you should be doing user research, because you will always have someone in customer experience being like, but we do that already. Here's your NPS. Like, what are you talking about? What are they doing? What are they doing that we're not doing? And I think that's so sad, because I think the two really complement each other.
And it's so different.
And I find it really strange. Like, for all my comments, I think the two complement each other, and it's just about finding where the two meet, and that is something I'm still working on and developing, but I'm super open to it, and especially in like the places that I've worked. And in my last job, I built a really good relationship with the customer success managers and the data analysts that were looking at that stuff, and that would inform the work that we would do, which is how it should be. And any findings I always funneled through to relevant teams. I didn't just keep it to my specific digital strand. So yeah, the state of UX is really interesting. And then add in the layer of qualifications, because there's a lot of people that have PhDs in very specific things, and they come into UX, and they often walk into roles because having a PhD, I would say 9 times out of 10 means that you have a very excellent kind of set of research skills and analysis skills. But then I've met a lot of PhD people
with no social skills.
not just the social skills, actually, the ability to function in a business environment, actually. And I've seen that. And but then you have people with those qualifications that come in at a level, and it drives it down for the rest of us. And you look at the work they produce and you're like, but what are you doing?
Do you get a PhD in leadership when you're at uni, do you? Like, is it like actually leading people?
And I think going back to the question you asked me about obstacles, is that I don't have a design background. So I have often, because I went through a massive thing of networking like a couple of years ago, where I tried to connect with lots of different types of researchers around the world, and 8 times out of 10 it was great. I met all women. I met some great women, but then I met a couple who, when I said, they were like, oh, so what's your background? I said, oh, I used to be a librarian, I have design background. You could literally see them shut down.
Gloss over.
and I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry that I didn't do anthropology or psychology, and that I come from an information science, politics and language background, so I understand how people access information, which is ironic since we're built on a search engine industry. But no, you're fine. I didn't study anthropology. And I think that's an interesting thing in the industry, where sometimes you have to really prove why you should be given an opportunity. If you don't, and it's similar to every other industry, right? Like, if you don't have like the set parameter of what is seen as, oh, this means they can do the job, it can be a lot harder to get the job.
Well, that's such a box ticking thing, though, isn't it? And I know the frustration that I hear from so many women who are looking for jobs at the moment, in it being such a clearly defined set of criteria, like you said, the X amount of experience, X qualification. And with what we do, I think it's so much more about being attuned to organizational culture, being able to listen to and tune into what's going on for humans. Like, it's much more.
I always say like, how good are you at organizing your time?
You can learn any tools, though, right? But you can't.
You can learn tools. You can't learn empathy. You can't learn empathy. You can't. You can't learn empathy. You can't learn how to effectively talk to stakeholders. I have seen so many people that be the thing
that's usually the thing that CX professionals fail at, to be completely honest, is like they just on a one man or woman mission to bang this drum about customer experience and customers, but have absolutely no idea how to engage the organization with a commercial view of why that is important, and the leadership and influencing abilities to be able to carry that through to a point where change actually happens. But I'm really sorry, Natasha, I've just realized like we are way over time.
It's okay. No, sorry, I've given you some really long answers for you to unpack, so that's on me.
No, I was just thinking about our listeners. I'm sure they and also, like, were you supposed to be somewhere? I know I've got to be somewhere in a few minutes, so let's draw this to a close. It's been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. The time literally flew by for me because it was so fun. You're super engaging. I love the fact that you've just shown up completely as yourself and spoke as loudly as you like about what you think about stuff, and long may that continue. We need more of us standing up and saying what we think, sharing our opinions, even if some people aren't going to agree with us. That doesn't matter. What we need to drive forward now is a different opinion, a different point of view. And it's only by being brave enough to talk about our diverse ranges of points of view and experiences that we're going to be able to actually move the needle for where we've got to get to. And it has to be around the future of digital being integrated into this wider field of customer experience. So I think we need more collaborations. Can't wait for the masterclass, and hopefully some real food for thought for the CX community, who have the more traditional CXs, let's say. So what is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with, like one piece of advice or a takeaway from this conversation? What would your sentence be?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot. I think for me it would be that that failure is hard at the time, but it's probably where you grow the most. Yes,
love that. That's a great note to end on. And thank you so much again, I've said it already, but for just turning up, being yourself, sharing with so much honesty and vulnerability. I think you're awesome.
Thanks, Claire. And thank you to everyone who is listening. Hope you stuck with us this far.
I'm sure they did. So that's it for this week. Thank you, everybody. See you next time. Bye. Bye, Natasha. Thanks for listening to the Inspiring Women in CX podcast with me, Clare Muscutt. If you enjoyed the show, please drop us a like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. And if you want to know more about becoming a member of the world's first online community for women in customer experience, please check out www.womenincx.community/membership. Join us again next time, where I'll be talking to one of our community members from London about leveraging the alignment between marketing and customer experience in B2B. See you all soon.